Nearly there. We're good. We're good to go, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you very much, and welcome back to the second part of council. And we have questions on notice from members of council, and we got to item 19, Councillor Wade to Councillor Hollingsworth, land at Meadow Lane, Iffley, Part 2.
No further supplementary. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Hollingsworth, call-in process.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to ask Councillor Hollingsworth if he remembers the days when there was a councillors all members email address which councillors commonly used to circulate all members with a call-in request at one stroke, and ask him if, given that the implementation of planning policy is supposed to be a non-party political matter, does he not rather mourn the loss of collegiality amongst the councillors that has resulted from the current rather insular way of working?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The email address still exists, so it's open to anyone to use it. As I said in my answer, it's up to individual councillors to decide from whom they wish to ask for support for a call-in. And I don't think it's my position, the officer's position, or anyone else's position to tell individual councillors how best to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Upton, active travel in the city group.
Yes. Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Upton very much for her reply. The plethora of organisations involved in cycling alone demonstrates why we need a cycling champion to keep tabs on it all. Louise, I'm still very hazy about what this active travel in the city group brings to the party. There are already organisations which, as you describe, quote, share information about active travel initiatives, COSAT for one, and some of them actually take initiatives. In particular, could you tell me, these are my further questions, what is an activation plan and in what way does it support the LC WIP infrastructure plan? I don't understand how a plan has activities. Cyclops, for instance, is already very actively monitoring the implementation of new or enhanced cycling infrastructure. Is this group doing anything different? Does it have any powers or do any actual work, or is it just a talk shop? And does it have any constitutional setup that spells out what individuals, or if not individuals, then what representatives of what other groups belong to it? So I'm still really quite hazy about what this group is.
Thank you, Councillor Wolfe. I may not remember, you went on to about 4 questions there, so if I don't get back to them all, remind me. So yeah, well, I only really found out about the group earlier this year when the council officer, who's our sort of physical activity doer, got in touch with me and asked me to join it. I think they felt a councillor would be useful on it. The LC WAP complements the LC WIP, which is the cycling walking infrastructure project. This is the cycling walking activation projects. So that is about, and what this officer has been doing along with Active Oxfordshire is to trying to work out what are the barriers to people cycling and walking. So it's not about building more cycle lanes, although of course we need that. It's about, so why aren't people using the ones that are there? Why aren't people cycling and walking using the existing infrastructure? So it's been, some of the things they've been doing with Active Oxfordshire are around getting cycling lessons for children, providing bikes. There's a very good Active Oxfordshire and the Oxford Hub have got an initiative called Ready, Set, Go, which is providing bikes and helmets and teaching children how to cycle. So it's about doing those sort of soft measures, if you like, that are not actual infrastructure. So I'm trying to think of a good example. I've only been to 1 meeting now, or 2. And Cyclops did come to one of them, and one of the things it is there to do is, Cyclops have an idea to have a cycling festival. So it was, how can we get people involved in that, and how can Active Oxfordshire get people involved with that, and what can the City Council do to help with that? I mean, if you would like to join us, I'm sure that would not be a problem at all.
No, thanks.
Okay, but there's no official constitution. They have meetings when they think there's something to discuss at them. So then the next one we've got planned, there's going to be a reformed bicycle thief is coming along to talk about how, and we're getting the local police along as well. You know, what is the best way to stop your bicycle being stolen? You know, how you know, so that kind of thing, because that obviously is a barrier to people cycling. But perhaps we can have another conversation about it, not with 40 other people there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Landell Mills to Councillor Tidball, Council Hub Help for Boating Community.
Marie may still be putting her little one to sleep. She said that might be.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here.
No,
I
she's
can't
here.
hear anything.
Oh, well, sorry, I don't mean to. Well, if I'd like to know is how. I think there's a lot of people who are quite hard up on the on living on the river, who are all stuffed by because they're all freelance. A lot of them have been stuffed by COVID and things. And I think how much uptake has there been on the fuel thing? Because I think they by and large have to burn coal to keep warm in their boats. And I wondered how much uptake there has been on the thing that you talked about. You said there was a thing there, there's a fuel support grant or whatever. How much uptake has there been of that?
I don't have the figures specifically for the boating community in front of me, but I will make sure that officers email. And I would say there are a number of schemes available that the council can support with. And I'd encourage anyone in the boating community to contact our single point of contact telephone number, or to fill out our online assistance form in case there's anything else that officer colleagues can assist with at the council.
It'd be good if you could email me on what all the response has been, because it just, in terms of numbers, because I just feel they've been slightly neglected. Is my concern. They're not a
Thank you, Tom.
part of the constituents. So
Thank you, Tom. And your second question for the boating community, please.
no further, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wolf to Councillor Brown, Council administered COVID business support.
No supplementary, thank you very much.
Councillor Simmons to Councillor Brown, standards complaint.
Yeah, thank you very much for your response. I'm just, obviously it's an unusual situation to have this going on through elections, through PERDA period. And I'm just wondering whether there's any sort of changes to process because of PERDA or because of, elections. And it seems that I would hope that everyone would want any councillor subject to a complaint to sort of have a fair hearing rather than be sort of, left in limbo. So I'm just wondering whether there's any sort of special, it sounds like from your answer it's not, but just whether there's any special sort of process that kicks into place if these complaints sort of spread into PERDA period, election period.
I don't think I've got anything to add to the response that's on the sheet. The procedures are set out in the council's constitution. It's for the monitoring officer to interpret them. It would be quite wrong of me to add anything further to that.
That's a fair response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown, launch of the locust report.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Apologies for the misattribution of this question 26. Yes, whether or not we describe it as a City Council report, we paid for it. And it makes me think about the many horizon scanning reports written by officers that we see at the Growth Board and in many other places. The cost that fell on this council, was only made public to the council because I asked about it. And I do notice, looking at the Localis website, that the 5 members of the board of that organisation are all current or former Tory council leaders. It seems a rather curious bedfellow for this council to be handing money given to us by our taxpayers in Oxford. Was it a good use of funds?
I think it was an excellent use of funds. I think that you'll find that people across the sort of political spectrum thought it was a good report and a very important one in putting Oxford, the case for Oxford and investment in Oxford. And regretfully, if you're going to influence a Conservative government, it's probably better to talk to them through people that they respect and admire than perhaps are more their political opponents. So I don't think that aspect of it is a negative. I think it's probably a positive. But importantly, it's a good report. It's well written. It was well received, both at very senior level in the civil service and across our local partners. And I had the pleasure of being invited to the launch of the report and to speak at it, and I was there alongside a number of pretty distinguished fellow panelists, from David Prout from the university, Bev Hindle from the ARC. I think it was an important report for Oxford, for our ability to attract government funding, and for our ability to make sure that Oxford's voice is not lost in government circles.
You're mute, Lord Mayor.
It's a long day, my apologies. Okay, again, Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown, Oxford, Cambridge. No, it isn't. It's Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown, Cabinet's policy position.
Yes, well, thank you. You've answered one of my questions, which is why we need two deputy leaders. It's clearly one for each policy. What has emerged is a policy that says where communities want it, which simply runs the risk of the traffic problem being dumped in the wards where the people don't shout as loud. That seems to me to be followership, not leadership. And would the leader agree with me that what we really need is something that's been woefully lacking so far, which is a genuine strategic plan for our entire city taken holistically, and crucially, really genuine, deep, forensic consultation?
Well, that would probably be more of a question for Councillor Hayes in his liaison with the County Council in terms of the transport strategy. But I would agree with him, and I will ask him to come in a second to respond on that particular aspect. I think it's something that we have made representations to the county about many times. But I will pick up on his specific point around consultation, because I'm really quite astonished to hear Councillor Gant suggesting that we shouldn't consult with local people on these issues and shouldn't listen to the views of local people about CPZs, because I think it's important that we do, and it's been our position that we should do that. So I find that a bit astonishing, to be honest.
Lord Mayor, may I?
No, if you don't mind, if you could just send, no, because you've asked a question, if you can send Councillor Brown.
Point of order then, if I may, misrepresentation. That was exactly the opposite of what I said. I said we should have consultation.
Okay, look, we're not going to have a debate. We're going to move on to the next question. You can resolve this by email. Thank you.
Sorry, I think I was being brought in by Susan. If I may briefly just
My
add.
apologies, yeah, briefly.
Yeah, so first of all, would entirely agree with the leader that consultation is absolutely the right approach to take. You absolutely cannot force change on people, and it's the approach of the City Council to listen at all times and to work with the County Council so that it can be as strategic as possible. All that we do as a City Council, a Labour City Council, is to work with the County Council to get the best for the city in terms of moving around the city and transport, and to do that in a fair and equitable way. And I agree with Councillor Gant, if you want to have a strategic transport approach, the most strategic transport approach, vote Labour at the May 6 elections. That's the way that you get it. And the final thing that I'll say, if I may, is that it's entirely right for Councillor Gant to say as he does, but I remember going into a North Oxford ward where the local councils were opposing the installation of EV charging infrastructure in a NIMBY way, even though I understand the Lib Dems are in favour of the rollout of EV charging infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got just over 4 minutes and we have 4 questions. Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown, Oxford, Cambridge, Art Governance.
Yes, disappointing answer, Lord Mayor, because it doesn't answer what I asked about, which was about the emerging growth body, and instead I got an answer about the existing ARC leaders group. And indeed the leader has misrepresented the way that the local representatives on that group were chosen, characterising it as party political. I was at the meeting where those elections were made, and that's just simply not correct. So my supplementary is simply to repeat the question: would she agree about the desirability of local democratic accountability being central to the emerging growth body for the ARC?
I'd be very happy to repeat my answer, which did indeed answer his question and made it very clear that I do and have consistently argued for proper representation of this city at all levels within the ARC's leadership. And unfortunately, the reason I made the point was that I haven't had the support, unfortunately, of neighbouring authorities, of either Liberal Democrat or Conservative political leadership. And I think that was relevant to my answer, which is why I put it in.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, Councillor Brown, NHS Pay Award.
Thank you for the answer, no supplementary.
Thank you. Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown, recognition of Oxford vaccine team.
Thank you for the answer. It's great to know that plans for this will involve parties in administration and opposition, whoever they turn out to be.
Thank you. And the last one, last but not least, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Brown, International Women's Day.
No supplementary, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 13, which is page 239, the partnership report, Oxfordshire Resources and Waste Partnership. And I call upon Councillor Nigel Chapman, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This is a relatively low-key report because actually the partnership has been in a sort of hibernation for the last 18 months, partly as a result of funding difficulties in getting the level of support we need from the County Council. That has now been resolved, and the partnership is going to meet again for the first time for a while on April the 12th to discuss a number of issues which I outline in the paper. So I think I'll just leave it there. The paper really speaks for itself. Thank you.
Certainly does. It's just to note, but there are any questions? Elizabeth Wade, Liz Wade, sorry.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's paragraph 11 of this report. The Environment Bill and the new regulatory framework will have considerable impact on the Council's waste and recycling operations. But do we have an idea of what the additional cost of implementing this will be? It looks to me as though it's going to have a substantial impact on our finances as well as on the work that ODS are doing.
Well, it may well do, but it's impossible to know by how much at this point. I mean, we've got to wait for the details of the environmental bill and how it makes its journey through Parliament. I think at the moment we have a kind of quite complicated system of credits that come back to us for recycled waste. And I think that will be under scrutiny. And I also think the fact that the county wishes to make savings in this area is a worry. So we will have to be very vigilant about this to make sure that our excellent recycling levels, and tomorrow I'm going to be announcing record recycling levels in the city, we're not being penalised because of the excellence of our work in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Craig Simmons, please.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel, for your report. I do notice in paragraph 8, you mentioned the importance of the circular economy. And indeed, I read the Oxfordshire Resources and Waste Strategy, and it's got some really good explanations of what the circular economy is. And then looking towards the action points, I was hoping to see lots of actions around the circular economy, but all it said was they're going to embrace it and promote it without actually saying how they're going to do any of these things. So I'm hoping that you can use your sort of influence and position to actually sort of try to get the partnership to do, you know, to take the circular economy seriously and do more about it.
Well, I think that's a perfectly fair challenge, Councillor Simmons, so I will do my best.
Thank you.
Councillor Tom Landell-Mills.
Thank you. Nigel, the city's got quite a hill to climb. I looked at the local stats on recycling and it's not a great story. We've got 52.6%. We're the lowest in Oxfordshire. you're beaten, with the cities being beaten by the 2 Tory shires, and the Lib Dems, I hate to admit it, are actually virtually the best in the country. And so you've got to I'll share with you afterwards the government figures. I just checked them before the meeting. We're on South Oxford District Council on 64%, West thingamajig, Whitehorse on 63%, Oxford City on a dismal 52.6%.
With respect, Councillor Landon,
I think we've got quite a hill to climb.
Well, you're comparing apples with pears there, frankly, because the point is that all those district councils are largely rural with small towns. It'd be much fairer to compare Oxford with urban areas, with large student and transient populations, which we have. And I think rather than, raining in our parade, it might be better if you were to speak up for the excellence of our record, which is year on year for the past 6 years to improve recycling rates in the city to a record level of over 53% in the last period, which remembers me the COVID period. Hang on, which is
Councillor Mills. So hold on, you two for a minute, please. Councillor Mills, please do not talk over each other. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
I make the point that it's been a difficult period in the COVID period, but ODS has done an extremely good job in the recycling area. And I don't think your comparison with, frankly, district councils of a largely rural nature is a fair one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Susan Brown. Sorry. I saw your hand up.
No, I had put it up, but I can't add anything to Nigel's response, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us nicely on to item 14, page 243, the Scrutiny Committee update, and I hand over to Councillor Andrew Gant.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'll be brief as time is getting on. The report is in front of you. It refers to only 2 meetings since the last one, and the items that were discussed either form part of the budget, which of course has been and gone, or most of them appear elsewhere on our agenda tonight, so in various forms. So I won't make any comments on those, but happy to answer any questions. Then there are a number of reports back from various working groups which have been working extremely hard, and review groups, notably the group looking into domestic abuse chaired by Councillor Aziz, which did excellent work. And then just finally looking to the last few paragraphs 19, 20, 21, our excellent officer Tom Hudson is just reflecting there on the opportunity to look at things like the way that recommendations are presented and responses, and whether there might be a more effective way of doing that going forward, and indeed meeting management. So just to close, I'd just like to thank everybody who's contributed to scrutiny during the year, either as members of the committee on working groups or attending the meetings, and in particular the officers who have supported it so professionally. Thank you.
Okay, over to the floor. Any questions? I don't see any hands. Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Okay. Let's take us on to item 14, motions. We do have 8 motions in front of us. Whether we get through them or not is another matter. And we have 60 minutes, which will take us up to 9:24. Okay, the first motion, developing a food strategy. We have Councillor Craig Simmons proposing, and then I think we've got Councillor Tipple who's going to second that. Is that right? Thank you very much. Craig, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Councillor Tipple for sort of reaching out in advance of the council meeting to discuss this motion, and for the constructive amendment to it, which I'm very happy to accept, and extend her the courtesy of seconding the motion, even though it's sort of strictly speaking a green motion in our sequence of motions. So I'll be quite brief in introducing it, because a lot's been said by Fiona Steele from Good Food Oxford in her speech, and I think it's an excellent speech and a good introduction to the value of a food strategy. But I feel like I have to repeat some of it, in the sense that, during the pandemic, we had a whole host of charities and community volunteers, along with the council's own hardworking staff, not least from the community hubs, excelled themselves in alleviating food poverty and practically providing help to get food to vulnerable people who are self-isolating or shielding. And I very much like to thank each group and individuals who've made sure that those most in need were supported with food and any other help they needed. And obviously the council staff were particularly adaptable and responsive to changing circumstances. And obviously I was Lord Mayor at the beginning of the pandemic and went along to the food hubs and helped myself with deliveries and saw how they were adapting to that stage, very fast changing circumstances. Of course, a lot's been learned during the ongoing pandemic. Good Food Oxford, who you heard from Fiona, have been convening every few weeks during the pandemic, meeting with over 40 food service groups in the city, including food banks, larders, fridges, meal delivery services, etc. Collectively known as Community Food Network. And the Community Food Network have recognised themselves, as you heard from Fiona, the need for a strategy to address the difficult questions of what the landscape of community food provision should look like moving forward, given the imperfect system of income distribution and learning from the lessons of the pandemic. A food strategy would ensure that the council, the experience and recommendations of this group who've worked tirelessly to feed our communities are heard and can form part of a coherent framework of action, building on the existing Good Food Oxford Charter, which I think we should all be rightly proud of. In addition, of course, to those recommendations and recommendations from our own staff, there's also this emerging national food strategy, and part one was published in July last year, which should be used, as a part of a national framework to guide our own food strategy. Now, most of the recommendations from the first part of the national food strategy are targeted at central government, but as it develops, we're promised that that strategy will start to provide, much more of interest to local authorities, and we'll obviously need to listening to that and responding to that, as well as developing our own solutions. So the interaction between local and national when it comes to food provision is complex, but we cannot ignore any opportunity locally to do what we can to address wider issues such as access to healthy food, which has been mentioned. And to give one example, a recent sort of study by Broken Plate.
Thank you very much, Craig. Sorry, I was going to stop you about 20 seconds ago, but I was on mute.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That's the 3 minutes. And Councillor Marie Tidball, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really glad that our Labour amendments have been accepted in full by Green colleagues. These amendments sought to acknowledge the breadth and depth of this council's work to tackle food poverty alongside a wide range of partners across the city, and sets out a further set of concrete actions to address this issue going forward. Tomorrow marks a year since the first lockdown began. When Oxford was hit by coronavirus in March 2020, doing nothing was not an option for this council. This council made a commitment to ensuring that nobody in Oxford went hungry. Knowing that the pandemic would exacerbate inequalities, we established 5 locality response hubs, a depot at Rose Hill Community Centre, and with partners, the Oxford Hub, Oxford Together. Over 11,000 emergency food parcels were given to communities by the council between March and August 2020. And we worked with Oxford Brookes University and others to ensure that these parcels were nutritious and culturally appropriate. My great thanks to Sophia and a network of charities and community partners, including Oxford Mutual Aid, Oxford Community Action, Oxford Good Food Oxford, the Oxford Mosques, Good Gym, and Sirecox, who work with us to strengthen the food system in the city. My thanks too to some fantastic council officers who work tirelessly behind the scenes with these partners to facilitate this work and secure food pipelines and community larders to access to low-cost food for those who needed it, along with £145,000 of grant funding to support organisations to sustain the system when the council transitioned from food parcel delivery. When the government refused to provide free school meals during October half term last year, this council committed to providing free school meals to the children who needed it in our city. Supermarkets have significant food waste. Tackling food poverty and reducing waste to deliver a net zero carbon city go hand in hand. That is why it is so important that this amended motion shows Council's concerted and coordinated action to address food poverty and its resolve to continue to work with partners to develop a county-wide strategy that addresses the causes of food poverty as part of our wider anti-poverty work. And this should include officers bringing a report to Cabinet with proposals to commission a food strategy food poverty and inequality in Oxford, including recommendations on what's needed for a self-sustaining food system and our role in supporting this. It will also require bringing together the views and knowledge of our food network partners to bring a better understanding of the current root causes of food poverty, with a view to developing and implementing a meaningful set of solutions through a shared action plan. Tackling child food poverty, as the National Food Strategy recognises, is integral to all work that needs to be done in this area, and we need to campaign to address holiday hunger, to increase the take-up of free
Thank you
school
very
meals,
much,
and
Marie.
to access food larders for families with children in our city.
Thank you.
commend
Same as
this
Craig.
motion
I know
forward.
you're very passionate, both of you, about this, and I had to stop you, but that is the 3 minutes that you're allocated. Thank you very much. Okay. We also have 3 other hands up. So Councillor Dick Wolf, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment that it seems to me that government has probably 3 main functions, and probably the top of the list is to make sure that its people are fed. Next, probably that it's got they've got a roof over their head, and third, they've got warmth. I'm 68 years old, and I actually find it astounding that here we are in 2021 talking about the need for a strategy to make sure that people are fed. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me, because I've never known that this was the situation. We have reinvented Victorian Britain. So obviously I'm strongly in support of this, but I just wanted to pause and say how amazing it is that we're even talking about it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Tom Landell-Mills, please.
Councillor Mills, Tom Landell-Mills is so much better when he's not muted.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
2 minutes left. No, God, you got your 3 minutes gone.
The citizens of Oxford have responded generously, thoughtfully to the pandemic. All over the city, people have been helping and sharing with the creation of an extensive food network supported by large numbers of volunteers. This has stood in stark relief to the national government, who has had to be shamed into providing free school meals over Christmas, and now responding to the school holiday crisis on a holiday-by-holiday basis, and seem at some variance with their own emerging national food strategy. In Oxford, the speed at which local people responded to helping other people during the pandemic was impressive. One senses that the great majority of people in the city realise that more needs to be done to tackle food poverty and inequality on a long-term basis. And the immediate problems associated with panic may in coming months become worse if there is a recession caused by Brexit, the aftermath of the virus, and the emergency funding from the government drying up. Given the absence of adequate government funding, there is a strong need for a well thought through food strategy that concentrates on positive, cost-effective, local outcomes, which ensure people living in Oxford have access to adequate food that can be scaled up and down as circumstances require. We will support the call for the amended food strategy, and as part of which we urge the council to call on the national government to provide vouchers or cash to parents of children on free school meals during school holidays and half term, increase the ability of food banks to respond to individual temporary crises, increase access to and availability of allotments for people wishing to grow their own food, and provide free cooking classes to help people make best use of food resources available to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And may I ask just speakers after you've spoken, just take your hand down, please. Councillor Tom Hayes, please.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. I want to start just by saying that I'm really pleased that this is a truly cross-party approach. And I say that because I was a free school meal kid. Throughout all of my primary and secondary education, I depended on free school meals. I probably walked so fast because at the end of the school day, my mum would rush me to the local shop in order to get the cheapest food that had been reduced before it went out of date. So let me say that, you know, speaking with the experience of being a free school meal kid, we don't like people who cut our food support, and so we don't like Conservatives, but we also don't like people who take credit for enhancing food support when it isn't owed to them. So I really do hope that this is a truly cross-party approach. I hope that if this is going to be put on any election leaflets going into the election, that it doesn't try to pick fights between allies, but it actually truly shows a cross-party approach to enhancing food security in our city, particularly given that we need that cross-party approach like never before, given that we're facing the economic recession that is like to be leading to austerity on steroids. And we need to develop that our city's truly cross-party approach, because it's honouring what we did during the pandemic. At the heart of the pandemic response was all councillors joining together to say with determination that nobody should go hungry. We stood by people who were vulnerable, housebound, lacking access or means to buy food. And I think it's a credit to Councillor Tidball and to the administration and to all the councillors who supported it, that within the first weeks of the first lockdown, a food network was developed, anchored in an emergency food parcel system at Rose Hill, and across the months of March up to August 2020, over 11,000 emergency food parcels were delivered to communities by the council as a crisis response. And I'll close just by saying that we know things are going to get worse. Work undertaken by the University of Oxford and Good Food Oxford, who we heard from today, have highlighted the very significant increase in people moving into food poverty during the crisis, and it's expected that that number could increase by a further 30% in the coming months. There's of course a climate reason for acting too, and more about that will be said when we do develop that food security strategy. But I just want to close that we should all join together with a commitment that nobody should go hungry, and that commitment should sit within our wider anti-poverty work. And I hope that all of the councillors today can support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Wade, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a very important Green motion, amended by Labour and supported by the Liberal Democrats. There is no suggestion that this is not a cross-party motion, and it will be treated as such. A 2018 UN report showed that 2.2 million people in the UK were relatively food insecure, and that number has now increased to 2.3 million. This was the highest in Europe in 2018, and it's probably the same now. Fiona Steele has now told us there are 4,000 people in Oxford alone suffering from food poverty. So even before the pandemic, we were looking at a crisis. The number coming to our food larder in our Cutslow increases every week. And although we have Edible Cutslow, which is a fantastic initiative, this needs to be rolled out across the city. This is a crisis, and this council cannot relax its efforts. We support this motion unreservedly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have one more person, Councillor Nigel Chapman, please.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the ODS staff who were seconded to work with council staff on the food initiatives over last year. They did a fantastic job. The second point I'd like to make is that this motion and its whole spirit and tone contrast so strongly with the appalling stories of Conservative outsourcing in the last year, where we had that terrible business of food parcels at high cost with low value being delivered to families across the country. What a contrast in the way we, as a city as a whole, and this is not a party political point, went about it. And my third point is about dignity of choice. One of the things that really comes across from research in this area is you must give people choice about the food they have, how they cook it, and how they get it for their families. And I very much hope that any food strategy really takes account of that, because if you don't have choice about what you're going to get for your families in terms of food every week, your dignity is stripped away from you in a very profound way. And therefore, it's really important that we bear that in mind when we carry on developing some of the very good work we've been doing over the past 12 months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Not taking any more questions now. And what we'll do, we'll go to the vote. So if you could put your virtual hands up. Sorry.
I'm up, Lord Mayor.
Oh, my apologies. Of course you did. Go on, Craig.
That's okay. No, I'll keep it brief because I think there's broad support. And I think, you know, Councillor Wolf started off by saying how shocking it is that we're in this situation now. You know, we've sort of, you know, that the pandemics really highlighted the and exaggerated the inequalities that already existed, and I think that's really important. It shined a light on the problem that was already there that does need to be addressed. And as we all know, the causes of poverty are many and varied, and food poverty is just one of those consequences. Just through some people's comments, and thank you everyone for the comments, Councillor Landell-Mills made some very good points about what should be included, and I think a lot of that was already included in the Labour amendment, but I think it's useful, things like allotments and those sorts of ideas. And your point about Brexit is very well made. I mean, food prices are likely to increase and add to the problems of food poverty. Councillor Hayes, I hope you are convinced that the idea was to go cross-party. I offered the chance to second to Councillor Tidball and accepted the amendment, and I think it is something that should be recognised, and I think is recognised as something that all of us can get behind, and I think the speeches say that. Councillor Chapman, thank you very much for highlighting the point about dignity and choice. I think that's really, really important, and I have seen that. I was there as Lord Mayor to the hubs that they started, and the officers were very clear that this is a choice that people have. It's not just one size fits all box. It's like, actually, this is tailored to people's needs, and they asked them what they wanted, and I think that was really amazing and really showed a deep commitment. And just to end sort of on, I hope I'm missing on Councillor Wade, I think you're actually right. No matter how hard we try, there's going to be people in the city that are going to suffer and are going to be hard to reach, and it's just for our job as councillors, whichever party we are, to just try to find those people who are sort of the hidden food poor that we can actually reach out to and connect them up with the services. And I'm sure we're all doing that, but we need to all redouble our efforts, because there are still people in the city who haven't been connected into these wonderful services that the city can provide. So with that, I hope everyone will support the motion, and thank you very much for everyone's comments.
Thank you very much, Craig. Okay, if we can move to the vote, please. Those for, raise virtual hands.
As before, if you can keep your hands raised until I can check I've got everybody. Lord Mayor, I see 38 hands in support, and I think that is everybody. If I have missed anybody, please do shout. But that's all councillors that I can see have voted in support.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us on to second motion, housing and homelessness, and over to Councillor Alex Hollingsworth to propose.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I just check, do I have 3 minutes?
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, thank you. I hope you won't count
counting.
Questions using. Right, I'm on it. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that in the spirit of unanimity that broke out on the last motion, there will be similar unanimity about this one. It's one that's been tabled before, and I had to rewrite it because when I first tabled it, the proposal by the government to make rough sleeping sufficient grounds for deportation was just that. Since then, they have upheld their proposal, and actually it is now sufficient grounds. And I think nothing sums up the difference between the approach of civilized, humane, reasonable governments and the current government than that. But the broad thrust of this is also to look at the link between rough sleeping, the homelessness that's visible to everybody, and the homelessness that's less visible to people. People are living in multiple generation homes, overcrowded households, people who'd want to set up a home of their own and cannot. And the impact that has on people's life chances, both individually with the impact on their health, their educational outcomes, and their opportunities in society at large. I mean, we had a petition to this council, which effectively called on us to not build housing, and I think the danger with that approach is it disregards that impact on far too many of our fellow citizens here in Oxford. And in particular, what the motion calls for is what Shelter, this council and campaigners up and down the country have long recognised. First, that it is only when the market and social housing is being built that this country has ever built enough homes for what we need. And it also recognises that council housing is the only truly affordable form of housing. And what we need is massive investment in a huge programme, 200,000 new homes a year to make up for a backlog going back decades, to provide that genuinely affordable housing for all. And I think we've all got stories of people we've met on the doorstep that illustrate this, but I'm going to use one which was told actually to the leader of the council, a young woman from Blackbird Leys, somebody who was born here, who grew up here, who attended school here, who went to one of our local universities, and has a job. And she is the only one of her friends from school who is still able to live in Blackbird Leys, the place where she grew up, because every single other one of her friends cannot afford to live here, even in one of the parts of the city that's most affordable. And all of them have spread to places like Bicester, to Didcot, or further afield.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you. That is over by about 20 seconds. It's only because I was on mute. I couldn't stop you.
I'll do the rest of the summing up.
Thank you very much. And second, we have Councillor Shaistra Aziz.
Thank you. We know that the housing and homelessness crisis in our city and country is also a crisis of inequality. This inequality includes overcrowded housing and housing not fit for purpose, impacting working class people and disproportionately impacting people and communities of colour, including those with insecure immigration status. This has had a further devastating consequences during the pandemic. We also know the COVID-19 pandemic is exposing the huge and entrenched levels of inequality across the country and our city. Here in Oxford, the growing divide between the town and gown is the most stark example of this, as all the data shows. As COVID is showing us again and again, inequalities are racialised, gendered and intersectional. An annual piece of work by the Museum of Homelessness, named the Dying Homelessness Project, found that 976 people died while homeless across the UK in 2020, a 37% increase in the numbers reported by the group in 2019. Data shows that the Everyone In scheme is largely successful in preventing people from dying with COVID-19, as less than 3% of recorded causes of death were attributed to the virus. Everyone deserves to live with dignity and have a home, not just during a pandemic. Being homeless is not a crime and shouldn't be a grounds to deporting anyone. We need to ensure the government overturns this shameless policy. To truly build back better in Oxford and the country, homelessness needs to be tackled at its roots, and housing and homelessness needs to be at the heart of all our equalities work and delivered through this lens, starting with a mass programme of building council homes and social housing that is truly affordable to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and within time. And we have Councillor Liz Wade, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This motion last appeared in the council list on 30th of November. We would have supported it then, and we support it now. Even further down the list at that council meeting was our motion against the deportation of EU nationals, whose only offence, if you can call it that, was rough sleeping. That motion wasn't reached either, but I have no doubt it would have had the support of everyone in this chamber. Homeless people are the most vulnerable in our community. Often they have no recourse to public funds. On a night in December, just after the Home Office changed the regulations to allow deportation of rough sleepers, 1/3 of people sleeping rough in our streets in the centre of Oxford were foreign nationals. Priti Patel has said that deportation will be used sparingly, her word. Do you trust her on this? There are two ways to get people off the streets. One way is to provide funding for everyone in, which Shaistra Aziz has just spoken about. The other is to frighten people off the streets by making the streets into a hostile environment where people are liable for deportation if they are spotted. In response to the pandemic, most homeless people in Oxford have been moved off the streets with the help of government grants. But our city policy, once the emergency ends, must be to continue providing a home for everyone, and social housing is absolutely vital for this. Finally, the social housing white paper, known to most people as the Grenfell paper, is fine on building and fire safety, but it misses a golden opportunity to state for the first time that allocation policies must remove barriers to homeless people applying for homes and ensure that the allocation websites are easier to navigate for vulnerable people. This is something that we should push for now if we really want to change people's lives in our city. Thank you.
Sorry about that, classic mistake. I did see Craig's hand up earlier. You've taken that down, Craig, have you?
Yeah, sorry, it was
You don't want to speak?
hand, legacy hand, sorry.
That's right, no problem at all. Okay, over to Councillor Dick Wolf, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Very briefly, the first thing is it's very clear that the hostile environment, the bankrupt and immoral hostile environment policy is still alive and kicking. That's very clear. The second is I absolutely, and we absolutely support the contention that Shelter has expressed there. We will never escape the housing crisis without the building of social housing. It never was possible, it never will be possible. The only other thing I would say as we support this is that I actually also believe that the mechanisms that we have imposed on us for funding the building of social housing is worsening inequality in this country because it's forcing up the prices of the houses that aren't social housing. We have a complete, an ongoing housing crisis which is going to be made worse, I'm afraid, until we get a change of policy at the top. But we're strongly in support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mike Rowley.
Thank you. It's been said, Lord Mayor, so I won't detain you.
Okay, and we have Councillor Ed Turner.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. I wanted to make 3 points on this. I mean, one is I certainly wholeheartedly endorse all of the comments that have been made about the threat of deportation for rough sleepers. I think it's a terrible thing to do. And one thing which it reminds me of is the people have read, I think, in the media, some of the stories about worries about rough sleepers actually sleeping in bins. I think the fear there was partly amongst rough sleepers of being victims of crime, but of course also people will gravitate towards ever more secluded and dangerous locations if they're kept out of the way. They'll be further away from support. What a terrible, inhumane thing for the government to do. The second thing is I can only concur with the points made about the lack of harm, caused by the lack of genuinely affordable housing in Oxford. I appreciated this before I became a councillor. I was involved in volunteering for a housing charity and saw that very much at the sharp end. Certainly there have been some awful cases that I've been involved with as a councillor, even in recent months. I think it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say more, but really it's something that I think we all feel and we're all familiar with. And so the third point takes me to my third point, is that in a way, actually, I rather hope this motion doesn't pass unanimously. Because I think it's a relatively straightforward motion to agree to in the abstract. But the thing is, if you will the end, Lord Mayor, then sometimes you have to will the means. That means if you will the end of ending homelessness, you do need to support the construction of new social housing. And in my observation and experience, there are people who say, oh yes, of course, we need more affordable homes. But when it comes to sites which are contentious, then all of a sudden in that particular case, a list of reasons is discovered why it can't be supported. Somewhere else would just be better. Maybe we ought to look at converting, I don't know, department stores to flats, even in the absence of natural light, that sort of thing. That's not to say that every site is right for housing, but it seems to me, Lord Mayor, that in a place like Oxford or Oxfordshire, you need really good reasons to object to sites in the local plan. And I wonder if even in some of the contributions tonight, people have necessarily borne that in mind. I guess people will vote for this motion, Lord Mayor, but voting for this motion is the easy bit. Sometimes being willing to make the arguments when they're not popular, as well as when they are, even perhaps take a hit when it comes to elections. That sort of thing is necessary as well. And I hope people will consider doing that in the interests of homeless people and those in housing need in Oxford.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, Councillor Dick Wolf, I take it as the legendary hand. Ed's just spoken, and we have Councillor Tom Mills who wants to come in again.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to sort of throw into the pot the observation that the South Oxfordshire District Council has built 1,624 affordable homes compared to the city's 437. So Lib Dems basically get a shift on providing housing in a way that Oxford might be quite envious of.
Okay, you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Tom, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And we have Councillor Susan Brown.
Well, I wasn't going to speak, but I am now, because that is just so much nonsense. I mean, honestly, Tom, really. I mean, we have got South Oxfordshire have a completely different definition of affordable housing. They basically use the government's definition of affordable housing, which, as we know, is not affordable. You know, so to compare again South Oxfordshire with the city is, as Councillor Chapman eloquently said earlier, comparing apples with pears. If you're going to try and claim that their housing is genuinely affordable, during the monies that we have been given through the housing and growth deal, South Oxfordshire have built precisely no affordable housing through the affordable housing money that has been made for affordable housing, and we've actually been delivering nearly all of it. So I just think it's just ridiculous to sort of try and claim that they somehow are delivering lots of affordable
Susan, I'm just going to hold the
housing.
time. Susan, sorry, I'm just going to hold you just. Tom, can you put yourself on mute, please, because you've spoken already, and I'm not going to let you speak again, please. It's rude to interrupt. Councillor Susan Brown, you may continue.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just I would, of course, like to speak in support of this motion, which I think is really important, and just to reiterate the points that have been made by others during the course of this debate. It is the proof of the pudding is at the point at which we are making decisions about housing in the city, and it is very important that we do recognise the fact that some of the sites that we have left in the city for affordable housing are difficult sites to develop. But that doesn't mean that we don't need housing. We really desperately need affordable housing in our city, as this motion says. And I commend it to everybody, and I hope that people will support it, but I hope they will support it when it counts as well.
Lord Mayor, are you on mute?
It looks suspiciously like the Lord Mayor has dropped out of the call. Could I suggest the Deputy Lord Mayor takes over at this point? Move the debate on.
Righto. I see nobody else waiting to speak. I would call on Councillor Hollingsworth, I think, to sum up. Jennifer, would that be correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Thank you. That was excellent work, Steve. Leapt into the breach like a good one. Thank you very much for everyone's contributions, and it will be interesting to see whether voting for this motion is unanimous after that, because I think the point that Councillors Brown and Turner have made is absolutely critical. Speaking in favour of this motion and voting for it in the abstract is one thing. It's when it comes down to actually supporting the provision of affordable housing that on the ground that's the real test. I've been very entertained by Councillor Landell Mills's statistics, which he's picked up from wherever. It might be churlish to point out that the house building numbers he referred to happened when the South Oxfordshire District Council was Conservative controlled rather than Liberal Democrat. It's since the Liberal Democrats have taken over that they've reduced to nil. Perhaps they're not quite as compelling as he hoped. But nonetheless, the build rate in places like Didcot shows what can be done when you can allocate significantly large sites and bring them forward, which is why I've been very supportive of the South Oxfordshire plan, and aghast that the judicial review to it, which I have to say the vast majority of Liberal Democrats on South Oxfordshire have opposed, which is good, has been brought and is holding up desperately needed allocation, not just for people in Oxford, but for people in South Oxfordshire as well. So I would like to just sum up with the line that I was going to use at the end of my first speech, and just say that a secure, a safe, and an affordable home is perhaps one of the most basic of human rights. And this country has failed to deliver that human right for far too many of its citizens for far too long. And what we need to do is to strain every sinew that we have to ensure that we make our citizens, future citizens and current citizens, right to that safe, affordable and secure home a top priority, and do everything, not just to say that we support it, but to make it a reality. And I look forward to your support for this motion and your support for making it a reality.
Thank you very much, Alex. Colleagues, as far as I can see, the Lord Mayor has not yet rejoined us, so I would like to call upon you to vote in the way which has become traditional, raising virtual hands, please.
So I'm taking the vote for all those in support. And I'll just give everybody a minute. So I'm currently, I've got currently 37 hands up in favour, and with the absence of the Lord Mayor, that's everybody has voted in support of that one. So that's carried. And Deputy Lord Mayor, the next motion is then the call on the government to repeal the Vacancy Act, and Councillor Gant was proposing.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Councillor Gant, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Well, this one follows on very many of the themes that we have heard spoken about so eloquently in the last motion, which saves me the task of taking up any more of colleagues' time by going over them again. But just to pick some of those up, at the beginning of the debate in his proposing speech, Alex spoke eloquently about some of the reasons, the many complex reasons which lead to people finding themselves rough sleeping. And of course, what they don't need under those circumstances is to find themselves becoming a criminal by default. Councillor Aziz in her seconder speech again spoke eloquently and used the phrase being homeless is not a crime. Well, it's a sad fact in our modern age and in this country that under this act, it is in fact a crime, and it is perfectly clear that it should not be. The motion, I think, really says everything that colleagues need to know about this appalling piece of legislation, and the astonishing fact that, having been passed in response to the outcome of the Napoleonic Wars some 2 centuries ago, it's not only still in place, but is still being used. As my colleague Leila Moran MP said, it is an antiquated piece of legislation that should be consigned to history. And I very much welcome the fact that the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick MP, appeared to commit the government to doing exactly that, although it's not entirely clear whether he was speaking with the authority of his colleagues or whether in fact he said that on the fly. But the fact is that since saying that, the government has done nothing about it. And I would urge colleagues to support this motion in adding the voice of this council to calls that the government gets on with consigning this legislation to history.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I'm assured on the chat that Mark is back. I can't see him, but Mark, hoping to hand over to you if you are here.
I am, and thank you very much. I've come in on the phone, so I can't see anybody who've put their hands up. Can you, my apologies, can you just remind me where we are at the moment? Are we still on the second?
Lord Mayor, we've just taken the proposal for the third motion. So that was Councillor Gant proposing. So we now need a seconder for the third motion. And Councillor Wade has her hand up.
Okay. You, Councillor Wade, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Glad to see you that you've got back. I'd just like to speak to the fourth bullet point of our motion. This is the one about exploring the possibility of setting up or supporting a social enterprise letting agency, either created by the council or by a local charity. We've been researching recently social enterprise letting agencies, and I just want to talk a little bit about the two that I've looked at, because members may find it interesting. The first is Home Turf Lettings, which is in Bristol. This is a not-for-profit lettings agency with a parent charity. Social support is provided by city care providers and other charities. 41% of lettings are for homeless families, 40% go to rough sleepers and people in hostels, 16% to people who have had addiction treatment and are considered ready. So the social lettings agency achieves this rather extraordinary feat of encouraging and persuading local landlords to actually take people on who they have been very reluctant to take on the past, because they haven't been given the support that they sometimes need with these tenants. So that's Bristol, which has a great record of success. The other record of great success is in Glasgow, Homes for Good. This is a different model, but it's also very successful. And it's received 2.4 million lottery funding recently to roll its model out across the UK. It's a company limited by guarantee. It's not a social enterprise lettings agency like the Bristol one, but it's an ethical business. And it has in-house tenancy officers dedicated to the care, both of tenants and of the landlords. As a result of COVID-19, and this is of particular interest, I think, to us at the moment, a number of private rented sector landlords have become attracted to supported housing tenants because the tenants are supported and because LHA rates are consistent, so there are no failed payments or void. So it's a model that's working well, and it's one that we really do need to think about setting up in our own city. Thank you very much. I hope you'll support this motion.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions? Debate on the amendment? Sorry, debate on the motion.
Councillor, I can see Councillor Simmons and Councillor Wolfe have their hands up. I'm not sure if you can at the moment.
No, I've come in on my phone, so right. I'm going to blind. Thank you very much. Okay, so Councillor Simmons first, and then we'll roll over to Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you. I was just going to be very brief, just to point out that you know, it is possible to repeal the Act, and Scotland's repealed it, and people who might be thinking that it's just a sort of vestigial piece of legislation. There's still about 1,500 people prosecuted each year under the Vacancy Act. So it's not, it is being used. And the worst thing is, if you're a certain council of a certain persuasion and you want to use it, you can actually, I mean, I think it was it York, somewhere in Yorkshire somewhere, well, they're actually sort of 20% of all the national convictions, prosecution under the Act were just in, I might be putting down the Yorkshire people, but I think it was West Yorkshire, were just, you know, those convictions were just 20% of the national, just in that one sort of region. And the other thing is of course the fear of being prosecuted is arguably as bad as prosecution itself, because that drives homelessness underground and leads to the big problem of hidden homelessness, which makes it, as we've heard in earlier debates, just so much more difficult for people to connect with services that actually help them. So yes, I support this motion for all the reasons that are given.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wolfe, please.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, the other thing that's hugely offensive really about the Vacancy Act is that organisations and policies which are responsible for homelessness are then dumping the blame for it and the fault for it on the victim. It's actually a massive form of victim blaming. It's quite interesting when I think that the history of this Act as has been pointed out, comes after the Napoleonic Wars, when an awful lot of the people who were vagrants were actually ex-combatants, sometimes limbless and stuff like that. And history repeats itself. I've encountered in my work quite a number of ex-combatants who have ended up on the streets, having been discharged from the army with absolutely no means of support. Who is then responsible for that mess? Is it the individual? I don't think so. And so the idea that government, which actually is sometimes a prime cause of people's homelessness, should then penalise people for it, the whole thing is backwards.
Thank you very much. And I've just sussed out how to do it on my phone, sorry. Councillor Sharp, yep, who's that?
Councillor Taylor.
Hey, very much.
Sorry, just unmuting. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I just wanted to add my support to this motion. I find it is quite extraordinary how in the 21st century we have these sort of stray bits of legislation that date back to the Napoleonic Wars. And clearly it needs to be reviewed, it needs to be brought up to reflect current mores, current social norms, current expectations. I thought it was interesting. For the second time this evening, I find myself agreeing with what Dick says, which does happen sometimes, about the situation now with ex-servicemen who do sometimes find themselves on the street or actually in prison. And yeah, I think we should absolutely support this motion. I would thank the Lib Dems for bringing it to our attention. I had no idea that the Vacancy Act was sort of quite so old, and yeah, I think it's a good motion, and I'm very happy to support it.
Okay, I don't see any more hands. Can you just clarify that, please, Jennifer?
There are no more hands up, Lord Mayor, and just to let everybody know, we've got just under 15 minutes left.
Okay, over to Andrew Gant to sum up, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Nice to welcome you back to the meeting. Thank you to colleagues who've spoken in favour of this. Clearly, there is a consensus that this Act needs to be consigned to the dustbin of history. All the government has to do is make parliamentary time. There is a repeal bill ready to go. It has cross-party support. It's not difficult. The government should do it. I'm proud that when my colleague Lady Moran MP was first elected, she was prompted to bring forward this by a petition from Oxford University Student Union. It is an issue which resonates with all in our city. This Act needs to go. Please support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to move to vote, so you can put your virtual hands up.
And that's all in support, and I'll let people put their hands up and count.
I can't work it.
Lord Mayor, how are you voting?
I'm voting for.
Right, that is, I think that is everybody that I can see, unless anyone else hasn't managed to put their hand up. That is all in favour. So that's carried.
Thank you very much. Can you just clarify how long we've got left? I'll make it we have 11 minutes.
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
And I suppose the next question is whether we want to take the next motion, because I'm just curious, also an amendment as well, and it's 3 minutes for each speech.
If it's any help, Lord Mayor, we're prepared to accept the amendment.
You are? Okay. Okay, over to Councillor Wolf then, please, just to propose this motion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Over the course of the pandemic, I've clocked up 2,500 miles on my bike, and an awful lot of that was round the Upmore Circuit and round Burnwood and all places like that. I'm very pleased to be able to bring this idea for endorsement by the City Council. It occurred to me just now, actually, the last time actually I saw a fellow councillor in the flesh was Councillor Ed Turner and his partner Annalise down at the Otmore Bird Sanctuary for the Murmuration, which I just missed, and he saw. Yeah, this is a precious bit of earth that we have there, and it has lovely villages and ancient woodlands, and it needs to be enjoyed and it needs to be protected, and there's a lot more to it than that. We're happy actually to accept the amendment, which fleshes the thing out a little bit more. And I mean, the thrust of the amendment is it changes council asks the leader to issue a statement of support, and instead says consider a statement of support. Well, I understand that, because it is a relatively new idea, and it needs to be considered more widely so that it gains the public support, and that will give it much more energy, you know, and thing when it actually gets pushed a bit further. Concentrating on nature reserves has failed to halt the alarming decline in biodiversity in England, and biodiversity conservation action now aims to has to save wildlife at landscape scale. It's quite interesting, the Citizens' Assembly, as it says in the amendment, actually, the strong support there was for initiatives on biodiversity, with 34 out of the 41 members saying they would actively offset their carbon footprint if the money raised was channeled into local renewable energy and biodiversity schemes. There is public support, we think, for this. Of course, the Stowood, Burnwood, Otmore area has many opportunities to return land to uses that capture carbon, in contrast to modern farming techniques, restoration of woodland, wetland and peat, hay meadow, putting down of land to permanent pasture, etc. And recent research shows that the amount of CO2 captured is considerable if this happens. Environmental concerns exclude over 90% of this area already from development. Land use consultants in their scoping report for the Oxfordshire Plan 2050 Sustainability Appraisal identified 80% of this proposed regional nature park as environmentally sensitive. 65% of the area is already conservation target area and has planning policies to protect it. Half of the remaining insensitive land is above 90 metres of altitude and too prominent to be suitable for major development as well.
That's time.
Thank you. So this has many opportunities to return the land to uses that capture carbon, and I'll end it there. I think that's we've said as much as we can. It seriously needs considering. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And we have Councillor Craig Simmons to second. I'm just conscious of time, so we can all keep this brief, and that's including in the amendment as well, please. Over to you, Craig.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just say briefly, the proposal for National Park covering Stowood, Burnwood and Otmore is attractive not only because of the accessibility by sustainable transport from the people of Oxford, but it's also a very compact area, fits a lot into a relatively small space. That's relatively small for a protected area. You've got Otmore with the big skies, the march, the reed beds, open water grazing, and not to mention the unforgettable sort of starling murmurations. You've got Burnwood with its woodlands and its wet meadows, its orchids, hedgerows and green lanes, the remnants of a Saxon rural hunting forest. You've got Stowood with its gentle hills, floodplains, long views out to the Chilterns and ancient woodlands. And we could, you know, conceivably add Shotover, although there are sort of challenges with that. The southern slopes of Shotover, special scientific interest and a haven for wildlife trials and varied landscape. And the real threat to this area is actually not house building, but actually roads, you know, roads cutting through this area. And I think it does address a lot of the issues that Citizens' Assembly were concerned about, as well as recognising that there is that challenging tension between development and conservation of nature. And I think, you know, offering this area up to as a national park provides a lot of those sort of protections and addresses a lot of the concerns and the key findings coming out of Citizens' Assembly. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm only going to take the next three speakers. Steve Goddard, John Tanner and Tom Landell Mills, and I'm going to let obviously Tom come in because he was going to be do the amendment. So, and I would just say literally if you just have 30 seconds each. Steve, over to you, please.
Okay, thanks, Lord Mayor. My colleagues challenged me how many bird species I could mention in this speech, but I'm afraid you've cut me short. All I would say is to back up what colleagues have said. This is a remarkably diverse set of habitats within immediate striking distance of Oxford. I'm frankly shocked that Craig Simmons forgot to mention the purple emperor butterflies in Bonewood Forest, but there we go. It makes perfect sense. Given the potential threats to this area, which have threatened it before, many people who know the history of Otmoor will know the different threats that have applied there over the years, for this council to back up proper, good, strong protection for it. I should be very, very pleased if you back that up unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Tom Landell-Mills, you had your hand up, but I've noticed it's down now. Would you like to speak?
Just very briefly, yes, I mean, I support this motion, but I just instinctively don't know whether this long term really is the right way of protecting the area. National parks are usually a cohesive, this is such a diverse group of sort of landscape types. If you think of Dartmoor or Exmoor or the Norfolk coast, they're much more cohesive landscape type, and that's slightly, I don't know how that sits with the national park thing, but that's a more academic point further on. I think the idea of protecting it is great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Over to Councillor John Tanner, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I very much support this idea of a national park for Oxford. It's Oxford's green spaces that make it the wonderful place that it is to live. And I've served on this council on and off now for 31 years. And I wanted to take the opportunity while I'm on my feet to thank you all and the people of Oxford for putting up with me for so long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm not taking any more questions. Sorry, Sian Taylor, you're the last person.
All the way around, John.
Sian, 30 seconds, please. Sian, I can see your hand up.
It's a legacy hand. Tom Hayes was going to speak.
Tom, over to you, please.
Move the amendment.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Can I second it, Mayor?
Yes, you can. So we just need to, sorry, Councillor Wolf, just to sum up, you're going to sum up briefly?
I'll just say that to remind folks that we've accepted the amendment, so it doesn't mean.
Yeah.
No, I think it's all been said. There's much more it could be, but let's move on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, now we need to move to the vote.
So that's, Lord Mayor, that's all in favour of the motion as amended.
And I'm in support of it.
Okay, so that's 36 out of 36 councillors in support of the amended motion. So that's everybody.
And on that note, I now close the meeting.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
I'd like to thank everybody. It's been a bit challenging. The internet went, a few other problems along the way, but we got there in the end. And I want to thank again all the councillors who are standing down, and good luck for the future. And also good luck to all of those across all parties in the election, up and coming elections in May.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you all.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Bye-bye.
Yeah, well done, Mark. You're getting there.
Thank you. Bye.
Lord Mayor.
Thanks, bye.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, and my record still stands.
For now. Thank you.